Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you in another movie review. Today I'm reviewing an animated movie that I revisited on Netflix last night. And after several times of watching it, I didn't watch it several times last night, but this is like, I don't know, the fourth, fifth time I've watched the film. It's a film that still holds up and I still really enjoy. It is the animated film directed by Brandon Vitae, which is the 8th entry in the DC Universe animated movies that are released by Warner Brothers. And it is based on the storylines of Death in a Family and Under the Hood. It, of course, is the 2010 film Batman Under the Red Hood. Now, this film has a pretty good sized fan base. It has a 7.8 on IMDb, and on Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 88 with the audience and a 100% with the critics. Granted, only 7 critics reviewed it, but that's actually a pretty good score if you think about it for a film like this. Especially since it actually shows blood and all that, you would expect it to have a lower score, but that's a pretty good score. And taking all Batman films into account, at press time I have to say this is probably my favorite Batman movie, you know, counting the 4 live action from the 80s and 90s, all of Nolan's, you know, the animated films based on the 90s show, even the 60s show movie. This is my favorite one so far. You never know, that might change with one of the other films, but at press time this is my favorite one. Now, the plot of if you don't know what A Death in the Family and Under the Hood are about, A Death in the Family is basically a storyline that DC did back in the 80s, I believe it was, where they killed off the second Robin, Jason Todd. And it was because apparently fans did not like him. Or at least at the time they didn't. I don't know if their attitudes have changed in the decades, but based on what I've read about the character, I don't really see anything that would be a problem for me, but I guess it's more of the at the time things. And they basically had all the fans vote whether they wanted to have him killed off or stay alive, and it won to have him killed off. And we got A Death in the Family, which was a very great storyline from what I hear. And then, of course, a few years ago there was the Under the Hood storyline where a character called the Red Hood returned again, and they were trying to figure out who it was. And, of course, we eventually found out it was a resurrected Jason Todd. And it's from those two storylines that this film draws inspiration. Now, from the two storylines, from what I understand, there's 2 major changes that are worth noting. One of which is that they changed the reason, from what I understand, that Batman was going after the Joker in Death in the Family. I think it had to do with him being like the ambassador of another country and then causing mischief under the guise of diplomatic immunity or something. Could be wrong, but I think it was something of that nature. Whereas in the film, he was hired by Ra's al Ghul to distract Batman while he took care of some banks to try to collapse Europe's economy. And of course, that also connects into how Red Hood comes back. Because in the comic, I do not remember how Jason Todd comes back, but here, this makes sense to me. It's the Lazarus Pit. So it makes sense it would change him a little bit. Now, the plot of the film, as I said, draws from that. It begins with Joker basically beating the crap out of Jason Todd, which is very great dialogue and all that. It's like, it's just funny. I'm going to have to teach you better to make him follow in your footsteps. Ah, nah, I'm just going to keep beating you up with this crowbar. Dialogue like that. After the Joker is done with his fun, he leaves, the building explodes, and Batman finds Jason's body. 5 years later in Gotham City, a masked criminal known as the Red Hood begins to take command of the drug trade. And he does it in a very good way. Like, he just shows up, starts barking orders. And the guys are like, why should we take orders from you? We're not taking orders from you. Yeah, that's real funny. Smart off to the guy holding the AK-47. It's just dialogue like that. That makes this movie great. Now, some of the drug people that he takes under his wing before were seeking protection from Batman from a crime boss known as Black Mask. Which, this was actually my introduction to the character of Black Mask. I have to say he's an interesting character, and of course he's going to be in the new Arkham game. So, good thing I actually revisited this movie soon, so I can remember a lot about Black Mask. But I could tell you that when I first saw this movie, I'm like, did DC rip off the Red Skull? Because that was my first reaction when I saw him. But then again, in the comic, it's a mask, not his face, so I guess that makes sense. Here it doesn't. Here it makes it seem more like it's his face, so I don't know. Anyway, Batman is doing stuff that night, and he fights a character named Amazo with some help from Nightwing, which nice to see Nightwing in the movie, especially with where they go. They eventually see the Red Hood, very briefly, and of course Batman, he has a big supercomputer, so he looks up stuff on a Red Hood. And the original Red Hood apparently was the Joker before he became the Joker. Of course, doesn't mention which storyline they're following, other than the fact that we see Joker fall into the chemicals, so we don't know, is this just him being a crime boss beforehand, or is this the more tragic version that was done where he lost his pregnant wife beforehand? Either way, I guess it's up to the viewer to decide, but it doesn't really make any difference, I think. Now, as you can tell, throughout the rest of the film, Batman is slowly trying to figure out who the Red Hood is, and once he does, he has to figure out how, which leads him to Ra's al Ghul, and then some talks with Jason when they actually do cross paths, like one time when they're fighting back to back against 4 trained assassins, which I thought was a pretty good scene. Nah, I'm just stalling for time. Batman shows up, stuff like that. And of course, Red Hood is continuing his plan, which I'm not going to spoil what his plan is, but if at the beginning of the film, if you can guess who Red Hood is, other than the fact that I just spoiled it in this review, you can kind of guess along as the film progresses what his plan is. And of course, the Joker eventually gets out thanks to Black Mask, and it goes to a good climax from there. And that's about all the plot I'm going to talk about, other than the fact that it is very emotionally charged. And unlike some of the other animated films, like Mask of the Phantasm, Sub-Zero, and Mystery of the Batwoman, I haven't seen that one, the latter two yet. But from what I understand, I think you have to have some knowledge of the animated series to fully appreciate the films. I mean, you can watch them without having to watch the animated series, but the emotional stuff makes a little bit more sense. Whereas with this film and the other animated ones, you only have to have a loose knowledge of the comics, well, other than the fact of some of the characters, of course, to understand it. Like, you have to know who Nightwing was beforehand, even though they explain it in the film. They do kind of explain the whole thing between Jason, Todd, and Batman within the film. Joker and Batman, I don't think that really needs to be explained. Ra's al Ghul, I don't really think needs to be explained that much for anyone who knows even a little bit about comics. I mean, you could just watch the 90s series and understand a lot about the stuff back and forth between characters, even though they do change some of it in that show. Now, music-wise, the music was pretty good. It was done by a guy named Christopher Drake, which I want to see what else this guy has done real quick. Apparently he did the scores for Hellboy, Sword of Storms, and Hellboy, Blood and Iron, films I haven't seen, but that's cool. He did the score to the Konami game, Hellboy, The Science of Evil. He did the score for Batman Gotham Knight, apparently, as well as Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, All-Star Superman, Green Lantern, Emerald Knights, Batman Year One, Justice League Doom, and of course both parts of The Dark Knight Returns. So he's getting a lot of good work. It seems like he's mostly doing animated and video games. I can't wait for this guy to actually get the score for a live-action film. Like, maybe DC will give him a job if they make another superhero film that's not Batman or Superman, or maybe Marvel will give him a job with the Avengers sequel, or maybe, who knows. Now, voice work, Bruce Greenwood voices Bruce Wayne, and not Kevin Conroy, which everyone, when they think of Batman as a voice actor, that's who they think of. But I thought he actually did a pretty good job as Batman. He didn't really change his voice that much, but then again, we don't really see him in the guise of Bruce Wayne other than when he has the mask off in the cave, so maybe he's just talking in his Batman voice. Because I know in the 90s show, Batman would do that sometimes in the Batcave. That doesn't bother me. Other stuff he's been in, he was in First Blood as a guardsman. He was in The Servants of Twilight as the detective. Double Jeopardy. 13 Days as John F. Kennedy, which I guess that's why he looks familiar looking at this one picture from '87. Because I haven't seen that movie in a while. The World's Fastest Indian, he was in Capote. Deja Vu as Agent Jack McCready. Let's see, A Dog Named Christmas. Dinner for Schmucks. He did voice Batman again in the show Young Justice. He also voiced two other characters, Wotan and the Flaming Sea. He was in Super 8, and he played Christopher Pike in Star Trek Into Darkness. And that's about all the stuff to mention with him. He did a very good job as the voice of Batman, as I've said already. Jason Todd was voiced by Jensen Ackles, which that's a name that, at least me, I don't recognize off the top of my head. He was in the My Bloody Valentine remake. On TV, he was in Days of Our Lives from 98 to 02, which my late grandmother would probably recognize his voice because she used to watch Days of Our Lives all the time. I mean, I used to watch it sometimes with her, but, not really paying attention to the storylines because obviously I didn't watch it all the time. The only major storyline I remember is when the guy with the eye patch was thought dead and then they showed he was alive, and then, of course, when the devil was possessing everyone back in the 90s. He was in Dark Angel, Dawson's Creek. He played Jason Teague in Smallville, and then he's on Supernatural, which I haven't really watched any of that. And of course, he voiced the character in the video game The Third Birthday. As Jason Todd, though, I thought he was perfectly cast for the role. His voice really does kind of fit the character because he's kind of a smart aleck, but he's also kind of a tragic character underneath that, and also he's well trained from it. And I do like his taunting a little bit, like when that one taunt he gives Bruce, when Bruce figures out that this guy knows who he is. You haven't lost your touch, Bruce! That stuff. And of course the AK-47 line I mentioned earlier. I thought he did a good job. Then of course the Joker, it's not Mark Hamill, but they got a guy that is also a very good voice actor. They got John DiMaggio, which if you do not know who that is by name, you will know who it is when I just say this one line. Bite my shiny metal ass. That's right, it's the guy that voiced Bender from Futurama. As Joker, he did a very good job. It's over the top mostly when he laughs and all that, and his voice, it's deeper than, let's say, something Hamill did, but it's not really as creepy as, say, Ledger's voice. But it's still a pretty good voice for the character of Joker. And in a weird way, his voice is still kind of creepy. It's kind of hard to explain it without you hearing it, but the moment you hear the voice, you'll understand what I mean. Other stuff he's been in, he was in the English dub of Princess Mononoke. He was in Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. He did a voice in Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. He was a coachman in Van Helsing The London Assignment. Let's see, these are his films. He was in The Animatrix. He voiced Colonel Santino in the '07 Ninja Turtles film, which I'm guessing that's the guy Leo beats up in the woods. Remove it! You know, that guy. He was Toyman in Superman Doomsday. Of course, Bender in all the Futurama movies. I don't think I need to say that. He voices Gorilla and Crocodile in Kung Fu Panda Secrets of the Furious 5. He was Saul in Bolt. In Wonder Woman, he voiced Deimos, which I guess that's how he got to voice the Joker here. Let's see, he voiced Leadfoot / Target in Transformers Dark of the Moon. He did a voice in the movie Epic, and he was Beard Papa in Wreck-It Ralph. TV stuff, he was in an episode of NYPD Blue, of course, episode of Law and Order. Did some voice work for Samurai Jack, Kim Possible, Snitch in Time, Duck Dodgers. He voiced Muggsy / the Rhino in the Batman TV show from the mid-2000s. Brother Blood on Teen Titans. He voiced General Grievous in the original Star Wars Clone Wars series, so, the original voice of Grievous, not the newer one. Which that one was actually very creepy. He played Foo Dog in American Dragon Jigalong, so he has a diverse profile of ones. I could go on here forever, but that's just some of the ones I recognize. Yeah, that's about it. And the rest of it. He's the voice of Waka in Final Fantasy X? Cool. No, more like Arnold. Cool. Okay, let's see who's next on the list. And of course, we got Neil Patrick Harris as Nightwing. We have to say that was actually interesting. It's kind of weird casting when you think of it, but I thought he kind of fit the character in a weird way. The character's only in a couple scenes, but his voice kind of fits the character. It kind of fits him knowing Batman a little bit, like, can you at least once just say, let's get in the car, stuff like that. And of course, I don't really think I need to say what he is mostly known for. But of course, he's mostly known as playing Barney on How I Met Your Mother, which I have not really watched that show a lot. I've watched a few episodes, like one of the Christmas episodes. revolving around the word Grinch. That's about it. It's not really much to say since he's only in a handful of scenes without spoiling it, but he did a very good job as Nightwing. Other stuff he's been in, he played Dr. Blowhole in The Penguins of Madagascar, episode of Will and Grace, Homicide: Life on the Street. There was another one on here I saw. Music Meister and Batman the Brave and the Bold. Where the heck where do I find that one? It says here Doogie Howser. I'm trying to find the year on that one. Anyway, voiced the title role in that one, apparently. Films that he's been in, Starship Troopers as Carl Jenkins, Undercover Brother, Cats and Dogs, The Revenge of Kitty Galore. This film, Beastly, The Smurfs, The Muppets, American Reunion, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 1 and 2, Steve the Monkey, and The Good Dinosaur. He played the Flash in Justice League: The New Frontier, which that's actually a more interesting one than Nightwing, but I thought he did an interesting job. And of course he plays himself in the Harold and Kumar movies, or let's see, at least the second two. Was he in the first one? Yeah. And apparently he was Tobias Ragg in a recording of the Sweeney Todd musical that was, just a musical. So he has a diverse portfolio as well. And next on the list we have Jason Isaacs as Ra's al Ghul, which I have to say, for a character like Ra's, if you're going to go with voice, you couldn't get a better actor than Jason Isaacs. What can I say? He played the Colonel character in The Patriot. He played Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter films. He had that one minor role as the minor henchman in Dragonheart. He was in the film Soldier, Sweet November. He had a cameo as Birkin in Resident Evil 1, the movie. Was in the Don't trailer for Grindhouse. He's an actor with a very great voice. And of course he also voiced a character in Avatar: The Last Airbender, the show, Admiral Zhao. How it's pronounced. I go with the show pronunciation in case people are wondering. Makes it easier for people to know who I'm talking about. So you couldn't get someone better for Ration. He did a very good job with the voice work. Then of course we got Wade Williams as Black Mask, which introduction to the character, so first time I hear him, and I thought he did an interesting job as the character. Not really much else to say about him. He's a mob boss, so fits a mob boss. Stuff he's been in: episode of CSI Miami, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, 24. Actually, a couple episodes of 24. Episode of Star Trek Voyager. He was in Candyman 3. He played the Warden in Avatar: The Last Airbender, which that was an interesting character. He played Manus in Batman the Brave and the Bold. He was the voice of Two-Face in The Dark Knight Returns Part 1. And in The Dark Knight Rises, he was the Warden at Blackgate. So, kind of funny. He does DC work animated in live action. And in Superman Unbound, he was Perry White. So, interesting that he has a diverse role. Let's see. I think that's about it for all the main characters. Yeah, that's about it, because all the rest of them is just like small characters. It's not really worth talking about them. The rest of the characters do a good job. One thing I find interesting about this movie is that Talia al Ghul has a role in the film, but she doesn't have any lines. You can just tell it's her because of the fact she's standing next to Ra's in a scene. So, very interesting, because if I have my comic lore right, during part of this film, shouldn't Damien be around, at least as a small kid, but I could be wrong there. Anyway, my rating for Batman Under the Red Hood is a 5 out of 5. It's a very fun comic book animated movie. It has great animated action scenes. It does have some violence, like blood in certain parts, which it fits the tone of the film. It deals with Ben,
blaming himself for Jason's death, and of course it also delves a little bit into Batman's one rule philosophy, especially since he's clashing with Jason throughout a good portion of the film, so it's fun to touch on that. And of course, just shows that Batman, at least in this stage of his life, wouldn't do that. When he's older, you can make the argument, Dark Knight Returns, that he might go down that path if he was in retirement for a while, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, if you have not seen this film and you have Netflix, turn it on.